Nobody knew the burden Elton John was carrying inside when he stepped onto the stage that night. When the lights came on, when thousands of people rose to their feet, when the applause deafened his ears, no one noticed the fear that flickered in Elton's eyes for a moment, that trembling gaze, that helplessness. Because he had learned to hide it for years. He had long discovered how much darkness he could conceal behind his smile. But that night was different. That night, everything was different. Madison Square Garden, one of the world's most prestigious stages in the heart of New York. A massive arena of 20,000 seats. Every seat was filled. Tickets had sold out months in advance. People had been waiting years for this night. This was one of the most important stops on what Elton John called his final tour. But backstage, behind that magnificent curtain, there was a very different picture. Elton was sitting alone in the dressing room, in front of the mirror. There was no stage makeup on his face yet. There was just a tired man sitting there. A man carrying the entire weight of a life spanning over 60 years, a career spanning over 50 years, on his shoulders. The circles under his eyes were traces of sleepless nights. His hands were trembling slightly. He hadn't told anyone about this. He couldn't. He flinched when there was a knock at the door. His manager David walked in. He wore his usual professional smile, but Elton had known him for years. He could see the worry behind that smile. 15 minutes, said David. Are you ready? Elton nodded. But was he really ready? He didn't even know the answer to that question himself. But the truly shocking part hadn't come yet. When David left the room, Elton pulled out the phone from his pocket. There was a message on the screen. He hadn't had the courage to open this message for hours. The sender was someone he had cut out of his life years ago. His mother, Sheila Fairbrother. Their relationship had turned into a battlefield over decades. They had reconciled years ago, yes, but some wounds never heal. Some words are never forgotten. He opened the message. It was just a few words. I'm proud of you tonight. I always have been. I wanted you to know that. Elton's eyes welled up. A man in his 70s had been transformed back into that little boy by a few words from his mother. To that small house in Pinner, to the cold stairs, to that voice saying, "You'll never amount to anything." He put down the phone. He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders were shaking. Outside, 20,000 people were waiting for him. Lights, cameras, expectations. But at that moment, in that dressing room, he wasn't Elton John. He was just Reginald Kenneth Dwight, that little boy from Pinner who had never felt his father's love, who had always sought his mother's approval. He was supposed to go on stage at 9 o'clock. It was now 8:45, 15 minutes, only 15 minutes. The makeup team came in. Elton pulled himself together. As he had done for years, he rebuilt his walls. He smiled. He made jokes. No one noticed anything. Because Elton John was one of the best actors in the world. He had learned this not on stage, but backstage. As his costume was being put on, he looked in the mirror. A jacket adorned with brilliant stones, enormous glasses. When had he first created this image? The 1970s, half a century ago. Back then, he was young and angry. He wanted to prove himself to the world. But now he was just tired. Wait, don't miss this detail. That night, there was something else no one knew. Elton's doctor had called him just a few hours before the concert. The test results had come in. There was something. Nothing to worry about, the doctor had said. But his voice was different. Elton had learned to read people over the years. He recognized that tone of voice. Something was being hidden. Let's talk after the concert, the doctor had said. Just focus on the stage for now. But how could he focus? Thousands of thoughts were spinning in his head. What if it was something serious? What if this really was going to be his last concert? Not just the last concert of the tour, but the last concert of his life. He tried to push this thought out of his head, but thoughts aren't so easily pushed away, especially the dark ones. Final preparations were being made backstage. Lighting technicians were completing their final checks. Sound engineers were adjusting microphone levels. Visual effects were being tested on the giant screens. This night had to be perfect. An Elton John concert accepted nothing less than perfection. But how exhausting perfection was. How many years had he been carrying this burden? How many nights had he gone on stage while sick? How many times had he smiled while his heart was breaking? He remembered 1975, Dodger Stadium, that legendary concert. When he stepped on stage, he had felt like the king of the world. Young, energetic, unstoppable. Now sometimes just standing up was difficult. But that night, he would go out on that stage, despite everything. Because there, sitting in the darkness, 20,000 people were waiting for him. And Elton John never left his fans hanging, and just when everything seemed to be falling into place. 5 minutes before going on stage, Elton noticed he was having trouble breathing. There was a tightness in his chest, a panic attack or something more serious. He didn't know. He didn't want to know either. He took a deep breath, then another and another. "Are you okay?" David asked, worried. "Perfect," said Elton. As always. A lie, but he had told this lie so many times that sometimes even he believed it. The lights went out. The arena was plunged into darkness. 20,000 people held their breath. Silence. Absolute silence. Then a spotlight came on. In the center of the stage stood a magnificent grand piano, a Steinway, Elton's most faithful companion. It had traveled the world with him, on thousands of stages, in front of millions of people. Elton began to walk. Each step was a struggle, but from the outside, all that could be seen was a legendary artist taking the stage. Confident, charismatic, invincible. When he sat down at the piano, his hands touched the keys. At that moment, everything changed. Elton John was no longer there. There was only music, only those keys, only those notes. When the first chord was struck, the arena exploded. Screams, applause, tears. Elton closed his eyes. He breathed in this moment. How many more times would he be able to experience this feeling? How many more concerts? The concert had begun. The first songs came one after another. Benny and the Jets, Tiny Dancer, Rocket Man. Each one a classic, each one a work that had touched millions of lives. But Elton's mind sometimes wandered to other places, to the past, to the very distant past. The 1950s, Pinner, London, a small house, a cold atmosphere. His father, Stanley, was distant and aloof. He hardly ever took any interest in his son. For Elton, gaining his father's approval was an impossible dream. One day, little Reg, he wasn't Elton yet, wanted to show his father that he could play piano. He had practiced for hours. It had to be perfect. He had to impress his father. But Stanley had just nodded his head and left the room, without saying a single word. At that moment, something broke in a little boy's heart. And that broken piece had never fully healed, even years later. You won't believe this, but even in his 70s, Elton still felt a pain in his chest when he remembered that moment. There were wounds that time didn't heal, holes that success, fame, and money couldn't fill. Now, at Madison Square Garden, in front of thousands of people, that little boy was still somewhere inside him, still seeking his father's approval, still trying to prove that he was enough. The concert continued. With every touch of the keys, Elton gave a little more of himself, but his body had limits, and those limits were beginning to narrow. On the 15th song, something happened. Elton's left hand cramped for a moment. He played a wrong note, a tiny mistake. Maybe no one noticed. But Elton noticed, and it shook him. How many times in his 50-year career had he made such a mistake? A handful, very few. His fingers had never betrayed him. But now, he continued, as if nothing had happened, but an alarm was going off inside him. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The tightness in his chest had returned. It was getting harder to breathe, but he couldn't stop. He mustn't stop. Just a few more songs, he thought. You can hold on. You always have. At the edge of the stage, David was watching with concern. He had known Elton for years. He could read his every move, every glance, and what he was seeing now frightened him. The smile on Elton's face was forced. His movements were slower than normal. The way he was holding onto the piano seemed like he was looking for support. David pulled out his cell phone. He prepared the number for the emergency medical team, just in case. But Elton continued, despite everything, because that was who he was. He didn't stop. He didn't give up. The stage was his home, and dying at home was better than living somewhere else, but the truly shocking thing hadn't come yet. In the middle of the concert, Elton took a short break. He drank water. He smiled at the audience. But in those few seconds, his mind went back to the past again. The darkest period of his life. Alcohol, drugs, eating disorder, every possible way of destroying himself. In those years, when he looked in the mirror, he saw someone he didn't recognize. That was when he first understood how fame, money, and success could hollow you out inside. One night, in a hotel room, he had thought about ending it all. Seriously thought about it. He had questioned the meaning of life. Why was he continuing? For whom? What saved him that night, strangely enough, was music. His own song had started playing on a small radio by his bedside. Your Song. And as he listened to that song, he remembered how he had felt years ago. That innocence, that hope, that love. Maybe his time hadn't come yet. Maybe he had more stories to tell. The next day, he had checked into a rehabilitation center. It was the hardest but most right decision of his life. Now, at Madison Square Garden, over 30 years later, Elton's eyes filled with tears as he remembered that night. He had survived. He had fought. He had won. But the battle had never ended. The inner voices had never gone silent. The darkness had never completely retreated. He started another song on the piano. Sorry seems to be the hardest word. Thousands of people were singing along with him. But Elton's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about how he felt when he wrote this song. That loneliness, that helplessness. Strangely, even among so many people, he could feel alone. Applause, displays of love, admiration. None of them could completely fill that void. As the concert progressed, Elton's body began to struggle more. There was a pain in his back. His heart was beating fast. His fingers were occasionally going numb. But he continued, giving a little more of himself with each song, becoming a little more exhausted. On the 18th song, he went to the microphone. It was time to speak. As he did at every concert, he would say a few words to the fans. "Being here tonight," he began. His voice trembled. "Being here tonight means everything to me." The arena roared with applause. But Elton continued. "I've been taking the stage for over 50 years. Every night, every concert is a gift. But your love," he paused. His eyes had welled up. "Your love has kept me alive, literally." People in the audience were crying. They had rarely seen Elton this vulnerable, and at that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Elton's phone in his pocket vibrated. He normally never carried a phone during concerts, but that night, for some reason, he had taken it. Maybe he was expecting another message from his mother, maybe some other premonition. He ignored the phone, but a few seconds later it vibrated again, and again, and again. Something had happened. Something was wrong. They took a break. When he went backstage, David's face was white as a sheet. "What happened?" Elton asked. David waited a few seconds before answering. "Your mother," he said. "She's been taken to the hospital. Heart attack." Elton's world stopped. Everything froze. Sound, light, time, everything became meaningless. When? An hour ago? She's in intensive care now." Elton leaned against the wall. He no longer had the strength to stand. His mother. He had fought with her for years. He had tried to make peace for years. Finally, in recent years, they had found a balance. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And now he could lose her. Tonight. Right now. "Cancel the concert," David said. "No one will blame you," Elton thought. 20,000 people were waiting outside. People who had dreamed of this night for years. People who had saved up money for tickets. People who might only get to see Elton John once in their lives. And his mother, in the hospital, perhaps taking her last breath. Two choices, both impossible, both heartbreaking. At that moment, Elton had to make a decision. This was one of the hardest decisions of his life. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and he made his decision. "I'll finish the concert," he said, "but we'll shorten it. The last 5 songs. Then we go to the hospital." David wanted to object, but when he saw the determination in Elton's eyes, he fell silent. He had known him for years. You couldn't go against that look. When Elton returned to the stage, storms were raging inside him, but on his face was the same smile as always. The show must go on. "Dear friends," he said into the microphone, This is a special night, and I want to present my last few songs to you with all my heart." The audience sensed that something was different. There was an urgency in Elton's voice, a tone of farewell. He began the first song. His fingers flew across the keys. Every note was like a prayer, for his mother, for himself, for everyone. But the story doesn't end here. In the middle of the fourth song, Elton's hand stopped. His eyes locked onto empty space. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The audience held their breath. Something was wrong. Then Elton came back to himself. He continued the song from where he left off, but those few seconds had struck fear into everyone's hearts. Backstage, the medical team was standing by ready. David was on his phone talking to the hospital. Everything was chaotic. Everything seemed out of control, but Elton kept playing, despite everything, until the last song. The last song. Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road. It had been 50 years since he wrote this song. Back then, he was young and angry. He was talking about the fakeness of fame, the emptiness of the glittering world. Now, in his 70s, these lyrics carried a different meaning. He was truly saying goodbye now. Maybe to the stage, maybe to his mother, maybe to an era. As he sang the song, tears streamed down his face. He didn't try to hide them. He no longer had the strength to hide anything. When the final note was played, the arena rose to its feet. Applause, screams, whistles. 20,000 people were saluting a legend, but Elton couldn't see them. His mind was already at the hospital, by his mother's side. He bowed, he waved, and he left the stage, without looking back. As the limousine drove toward the hospital, Elton looked out the window at the lights of New York. He had loved this city so much. He had given countless concerts here. He had accumulated countless memories. But now, none of it mattered. Only his mother mattered. The phone rang. They were calling from the hospital. Elton answered. He listened. He didn't say a single word. Then he hung up the phone. And he began to cry silently. His mother had survived. Critical, but stable. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Elton stayed at the hospital that night. He sat in a plastic chair next to his mother's bed. He held her hand. For perhaps the first time since his childhood, he had held his mother's hand for this long. "I'm sorry," he whispered. His mother was asleep. She couldn't hear. But Elton needed to say it. "I'm sorry for everything." The weight of years, fights, and resentments wasn't lifting from his shoulders. But maybe, just maybe, from now on everything could be different. As morning came, the news had spread everywhere. Elton John concert cut short read the headlines. Family crisis, said others. But no one knew the whole truth. What had happened backstage that night. The impossible decision Elton had made. The tears, the fears. The media was speculating. Fans were worried, but Elton was silent. He wouldn't leave his mother's side. And at this point, a detail that no one knew came to light. A few days later, the test results his doctor had called about became clear. It wasn't something as serious as Elton had feared, but it was a warning, a sign that his body was tired, that he needed to slow down. "You can't continue the tour," the doctor had said. "You need to rest for at least a few months." A few months. For Elton, that meant a lifetime. A lifetime without the stage. But maybe this was a sign. Maybe the universe was trying to tell him something. That concert night, all the news he received about his mother, his doctor, himself. When it all came together, it formed a picture. Slow down, stop, breathe. Maybe the time had come after 50 years of running, fighting, proving. His mother was recovering. Slowly, but she was recovering. And for the first time in his life, Elton was beginning to form a real connection with her. He visited her every day. They talked, sometimes for hours. The accumulated unspoken words of years were finally finding an outlet. One day his mother asked, "Why didn't you leave the concert that night? Why did you play until the end?" Elton thought. He didn't actually know the answer, or he did, but was afraid to say it. "Because," he finally said, "because the stage was my only safe place. There everything made sense. There I knew who I was." His mother nodded. Maybe she understood. Maybe she didn't. But at that moment, something changed between them. Weeks passed. Elton postponed the tour. He wrote a letter to his fans. A sincere, honest letter. He talked about health issues. about family, about the need for rest. The letter went viral, millions read it, and everyone said the same thing. Take care of yourself, Elton. We love you. This love deeply affected Elton. He had been taking the stage for years. He had been receiving applause for years. But this was different. This was unconditional love. A love that wasn't tied to performance or success. Maybe this was what he had been searching for his whole life. One day, Elton sat down at his piano at home. He hadn't played without a concert, without pressure, for a long time, just for himself. When his fingers touched the keys, he remembered the old days. Little Red's first piano lessons. Those lessons were his escape. Escape from the coldness at home, from his father's distance, from his mother's criticism. Music had saved him, it always had. And now, after all those years, music was still there, still faithful, still healing. He began to play a new melody, spontaneous as it came from within. The notes floated in the air. And for the first time in a long while, Elton felt peace. Epilogue. Months passed since that concert night. Elton eventually continued the tour, but he was different now, calmer, more at peace. Before every concert, he would spend a few minutes alone. He would take deep breaths, and he would remind himself, "You are enough. You always have been." His relationship with his mother had improved. It wasn't perfect. No relationship was perfect, but it was real. And real was more valuable than perfect. When he returned to Madison Square Garden, he thought about what had happened that night. The impossible decision, the tears, the fears, and somehow, despite everything, he had managed to carry on. When he sat down at the piano, he looked at the audience. 20,000 faces, 20,000 stories, 20,000 lives, and Elton smiled, with a genuine smile. He no longer had anything to prove. He no longer had anywhere to run. There was only music. There was only this moment. When his fingers touched the keys, everything disappeared. Past, future, fear, pain, all of it melted away. Only music remained. Only that pure, simple, beautiful music. And Elton played. More freely than ever before. More himself than ever before. The concert ended. The lights went out. The audience dispersed. But only Elton knew what really happened that night.